Hi, and welcome to the Social Angle, a podcast that helps promo pros gain an edge in the social media realm. I'm Vinny, and on this episode, I am joined by apparel decorating specialist Eric Campbell to discuss how he uses social media for business, tips for screen printers and embroiderers, and much more. Eric, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. It's funny because you and I have known each other for a long time, but we've never actually had a conversation. And this is our first conversation. I'm excited to have you on. I've noticed you on social media since I started back in 2009, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
For sure.
But I'm excited to have you here. So how are things going in Albuquerque? How's the weather?
Weather's good. It's cold. People always assume like, oh, you're in New Mexico. It's always warm, but we're up in the foothills of Sandia Mountains. I live over 7,000 feet. It's cold, but it's clear. That's the thing. Cold
Right.
and clear. Not a lot of snow, but very crisp today.
But you guys do get snow, and I know
We
that
do.
because I watch Breaking Bad, and I know that you guys get snow out there. Probably have more snow this year than we have in Philadelphia area. We actually got our first measurable snow last night,
Oh,
which
wow.
was just a coating. But February 1st, our first snow. It's so
That's
late. It's
wild.
uncharacteristic.
Yeah, we do get a little bit. And a fun fact, since we're talking Breaking Bad, I got to do a bunch of the stuff for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, a bunch of the screen use patches and stuff. So that's filmed out here in Albuquerque. It was actually
Awesome.
is local. So yeah, got to do some of that work. So if
That's
you've seen
great. That
patches on Better Call Saul in the early seasons, that was probably something I made.
I love both those shows. Big fan of those shows.
Great, great.
All
Yeah.
right, Eric. So before we get into the questions that I have for you, can
Sure.
you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, how long you've been in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I work in embroidery software and in education for embroidery. However, throughout my history, I've been an in-house digitizer and e-commerce manager, and I've been doing this for over 20 years now. So I started digitizing. I was still like a teen, when I started digitizing, but in the very, very late 90s. So in-house digitizer, operator, and came at it really as being somebody who worked on the floor of a shop, and then eventually came into educating and getting out there to the trade shows, teaching and writing. I've been writing for the magazines for many, many years. So that's kind of where I come from, really the embroidery space, but also the e-commerce space at the same time.
So you wear many hats, like a lot of
Always,
people in this industry.
always. Yeah, it's hard not to wear many hats, and especially when you're in kind of a medium-sized shop as I was. It was definitely a commercial shop, not kind of the prosumer third bedroom shops that are on the rise, which by the way, I love. I'm into that. But those shops really every person has to wear a few hats to get things done.
Sure.
And honestly, I was kind of the techie kid. I wrote all the websites. I also ran all the network cable. I built out the servers, and I was doing all the embroidery digitizing. But for me, that was all part of the same thing. I just really
Right.
wanted to, make something manifest out of what you can do on the computer. And that was the best thing. I'm here making a digital file and outputting it into real embroidery in 3D. It was just something that I enjoyed and did that while I was getting a completely unrelated degree, as many of
Huh.
us do,
That's so
and
funny. Yeah.
came back to the industry. But yeah, did it through school and just never left.
Awesome. And you've been in the industry, you said over 20 years?
Yeah, at this point, yeah,
Okay.
it's been quite a long time. So yeah, very late 90s when I first got in. I was a teenager, literally hucking boxes. Like that's what I started out
Huh.
doing. I was in the back of a delivery truck, delivering boxes of t-shirts. Embroidery operator needed help one day. I started working on that. Then I ran a couple of 12 head embroidery machines and noticed that in the corner there was a computer under a dust cover, and can't leave a techie kid alone with a computer. I asked what it was. Turns out it was a digitizing system that nobody was into.
Huh.
They were scared to use. I was like, I can control these machines. And this is what I always say. My original boss gave me all of the ability and time I wanted to off the clock to learn by myself. So I got
That's
access.
awesome.
These
Yeah.
days, people would say, "Oh, well, maybe I should have gotten paid for that." Okay, but yeah, I definitely spent a lot of like 20-hour days. I just about sleep in that shop because I had the keys to the shop and I was allowed to learn how to digitize. And I taught myself for the first several months just in the
Huh.
dark. Also, why I became an educator, because when I first taught myself, it was all trial and error, and it was quite difficult. And I
Yeah.
wanted to save people all the pitfalls that I had to go through.
Right. So you've got definitely a pretty good story here. You
Sure.
a lot of education, a lot of history, a lot of experience
Mm,
in this industry, and I'm really happy to have you. So Eric, I mentioned
yeah.
earlier that I've known you for a long time, but I've never actually had a conversation with you. You're one of the first promo people that I saw using social media way back in your Black Duck days.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so what was the lore of social media back, in 2009, 2010, for your business? And how has it changed for the better?
Well, the lure of social media back then was honestly a little bit of it was just blue sky.
Yeah.
The people who were there were very into it, and there's novelty. It's something I talk about when I talk about selling apparel or any sort of promotional products. Is that one of the things that drives purchases is novelty? Well, one of the things that drives interaction is novelty too. And at the time, it was very novel to be out there and to be able to tell your story. So there's kind of this blue sky appeal, and also, hey, being able to actually articulate your story and in a very visual way, especially as it came into its maturity, show what we do. The stuff we do is very visually interesting. So early on, it was like pictures, and previous to video, we could roll out, have images, have discussions, roll out from what was essentially blog post to interaction, and then
Hmm.
having direct interaction with potential clients. The funny thing is, every time we talk about social media, and I've said the same thing for many years, the key word in the phrase social media is social. It's very much the same thing that you would do kind of over the barrel head, over the counter in a traditional shop. But
Sure.
we just got to scale that up and expose it to more people. And then eventually, as kind of in the heyday of social media, when we had targeted advertising, as it got more, as it got more and more complicated and complex and
Right.
actually complete feature wise, we could target ads very, really finely. I think that's kind of gone a little bit by the wayside in some platforms. It's hard. It's a lot more pay to play. It's harder to
Sure.
get targeted ads to play the way you would want to, and especially in the last few years. But early on, it was just wide open. There was so much opportunity there, and for the people who were there, you had a lot of engagement, and it was a like I said, like a kind of target rich environment. People were there, they were interested. They also were wanting to share what they were finding on social media with their friends. So they wanted to be curators. If you had good content, they could be the hero who brought the cool thing to the rest of their social group.
Right.
And though that's still what we're doing now, in those earlier days, it was active. The concept of people just curating all the stuff coming through their social media feeds was huge. And
Right.
getting out there and being visible at that time was gold because, like I said, it was blue sky. There just weren't a lot of people doing it. And when you got out there and had something that hit that was interesting, you could get a lot of exposure pretty quickly.
Yeah, totally. And it was, you say blue sky, I call it the
Oh
Wild
yeah,
West.
yeah,
I think that back in the day, you were limited in a lot of ways. When we first started, there was no video
sure,
capabilities, no live
sure,
streaming. But I think just being able to embrace it, jumping into it as a new marketing avenue for your business, I think that's how I was able to meet a lot of,
yeah, yeah,
these people in the industry. Danny Rosen,
sure,
Curry Haasman. There's so many people that are, I met in this industry because they were sort of pioneers of social media jumping in. Dana Zeza, we mentioned earlier,
yeah.
and honestly, like it was the wild wild west. Now it's changed a lot. What do you see in the evolution of social media that has changed for the better?
I think what's changed for the better is honestly part of it is the technology because we just have the ability to share things like this live streaming, the ability to have absolute direct conversations with people live and to have it be easy to put together. And honestly, the technology surrounding it has changed. Everybody is currently carrying in their pocket a cell phone that is capable of doing so much of the work that we used to have to offload. I used to have to run, you know, camera equipment and other things to make decent content. And now any phone that I pick up, middle of the road to flagship, is probably good enough to do decent content that's worthwhile, to take nice images, to have decent video. And honestly, the other thing that's changed is acceptance. There is now no market, there is no segment that social media doesn't touch. There
Right.
was a period of time where it was like, oh, who's really on this thing? I remember that. Or gosh, I remember the early days of Instagram where people were showing. This is always the critical thing people would say is like, who wants to look at pictures of someone's sandwich? Well, it turns out thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people want to look at pictures of someone's
Yeah.
sandwich because it's relatable. And when we had this super visual medium, as it's become more visual, as it's become easier to share video, and our technology is better, it's so much easier to go into your shop and show the work you're doing and to show events you're at. It's no longer very hard to do live events, to do things where you can really get into that interaction. And the tools, the software, the ability to edit, incredibly easy comparatively to what we used to have to do. So on that side, it's great. Behind the scenes, is great. And on the front end, we just have an acceptance of this concept of influencers, the concept of people really kind of consuming social media as an entertainment stream that's really widespread. It means there's a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot of people there. The only problem is it also means there's a lot of static, that there's a
Right.
lot of noise in this space, and we don't have, like we said, that blue sky is not there anymore.
Right. Right.
But we do have a lot of long tail. That's the other thing people talk about a lot, and I really enjoy. Small interest groups can get a space, put it together, and then you can market to your small interest group and fulfill their needs. And it is absolutely possible for normal people to set up individual stores, individual channels that are for very niche groups that are engaged and who want products, who want the stuff that you have to
Right.
sell. It's much easier to do that, and we have the ability to kind of broadly service these niche groups, especially as our technology as
Right.
decorators change.
We couldn't do that. We couldn't do that 10, 15 years ago.
No,
I mean, it
not
was,
quite the same way.
yeah. I mean, it's
Not
a
quite the
lot
same
has
way.
changed. I would agree. The live streaming, the video
Yeah,
capabilities of social media have really set it apart from where it is today. Compared to where it was 10 years ago, where you couldn't do video. The only thing you could do was share a YouTube link, and
sure.
to me, that was great at the time. But now you can create video on all the platforms. You can do live streams on most of the platforms, and
Yeah,
I think that's what really has separated social media today from yesteryear. Now, we like you said, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now if it wasn't
sure,
for the upgrades in the technology. And to me, I feel like it's a blessing.
sure.
So we talked about how many hats you wear. We all wear many hats, but apparel decorator seems to be what you do. It's your passion. Can you tell us a little
Sure.
bit about how you got into this line of work? I know you mentioned a little bit about finding that machine back in the '90s and
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
tinkering with that. Were you always interested in apparel decoration?
Funny thing is, I didn't really start out that way, and I think sometimes people are a little disappointed when they hear that I wasn't, 5 years old walking around with a needle trying to embroider everything. At the same time, it's just something that I fell into, but I loved it once I did. And really, it started out for me just being around the machines. I always wanted to work on equipment, machinery, technology. If I was around something, I wanted to get my hands on it, and especially when we had things that were the means of production. And it's really fantastic to be able to control that stuff. So when I was in the shop that I worked at, it was not Black Duck. It was the shop previous to that I worked at for some years. The concept really was that I had the willingness to get on these machines and try it out. And I did love things like patches and emblems and printing. And I was into digital art really early on. In the days where we were really doing pixel art and 256 colors was a big thing when I was a little kid. That's when I started doing art on really old school computers, had computers at home when I was a kid. And the concept of being able to take that digital art and make something physical really appealed to me. So I just took off into it and loved it immediately, especially once I could do the digitizing. Once I could control it, and I learned that these machines were, and they're friendly embroidery robots. That's what I always say. We've got this machine that has an XY axis on it that we can control, tell the needles when to be up and down, and tell it how to handle the sequence. And it's very much like CNC or any kind of production, So it's that same kind of thing. You just have the ability
Right.
to control those machines, and it's something that I always thought was very enjoyable.
Okay. So yeah, it's something that you didn't really kind of grow up wanting to do. It was more
No,
something you kind of turned
no.
into. And
Admittedly, I was around a lot of apparel. My mother, who did a lot of other jobs between, and she ended up not doing this all the time, but she really worked on sewing and was a sewist. The word has changed over the years.
sewist, huh?
I always want to say seamstress, and that's not probably the proper term anymore. It's what she used to say. But when she was younger, she did that, and so I have been around sewing my whole life. So I was comfortable enough with it. I think
Okay.
that certainly applied to it. Once I started working with it, I had seen embroidery, I had seen sewing. And so the concept of it wasn't alien to me, though I'll be honest right now, I can't sew a shirt. I
Hmm.
can't make
Oh,
a garment. I'm
right.
not that person. There are a lot of embroideries you can. I'm a decorator, decorator primarily. I can
Right.
make
Right.
embroidery, but I'm hiring somebody to sew the shirt if I can help
Huh.
it.
Well, that's interesting to know. A
Sure.
sewist. I've never heard that
There
phrase.
there are lots of different terms. I always use because wait, a sewer is spelled like sewer. It doesn't look good. So sewist is one that I
Yeah.
like. But yeah, I'm trying to come up with a better term. But yeah, my mom used to say she was a seamstress.
Yeah. Sewer is sewer. So
So yeah,
basically, you want to
sewist
kind
is
of
nicer.
yeah, you want to kind of move away from sewer or sewer.
Yeah, it's spelled weird. Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
weird. I've seen people
Yeah.
use all of these, but yeah, sewist sounds a little nice, like
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do that takes a lot of skill. So
Yeah,
sewist is nice.
I don't have the patience for that. And
Yeah, yeah,
my grandmother used to do it, but
yeah.
she had more patience than I do. So let's talk about your weekly show. You have a show
Sure.
called The Take Up that aims
Yes.
to educate the apparel decorating community. Can you tell us a little bit more about this endeavor and how it's been received? Is it difficult to run and prepare for?
Sure. Yeah, it's really for the embroidery community. Certainly, I talk about business as well sometimes, but most of the time it's for digitizing the embroidery community. It's for people who are going to be in kind of that digitizing and decorating space. But yeah, it's not difficult. It's a fully live show, so luckily I do get to just kind of go live like we're doing here. I let it be off the cuff. I do some live interaction, and the setup for it. Yes, I do have to set up. I do have to do a little bit of work to have kind of my visual aids and my displays and banners and the kind of things that I do because I do often have materials, but really it's born out of my experience. So I'm going to admit to everybody right now, even though it looks very hard, a lot of it is off the cuff. A lot of it is me saying, here's an outline for things I want to talk about. Here are some points that I want to hit, but I don't write the entire show out before I start. As far as getting it set up technically, I actually have a pretty simple setup. I've got a decent mic here. I just switched this new mic from Samson, which is kind of it's not a very well-known brand, but a new mic from Samson. So I make sure my audio is nice. I do have an old school Logitech C920, which was kind of like the streamer's choice for a very long time. I'm still running that. I may upgrade to something with a little more resolution soon, but that's usually what I do. I make sure the audio is good. I have a decent camera that's got some decent resolution on it. It's not everything it could be, but it's decent. And mostly I do a lot of talking head stuff and showing software and showing visual aids. So it's something that I don't have to do kind of live work with. If I were somebody doing this in decorating right now, I would imagine having better cameras, having something else. You can certainly use your phone. People use, DSLRs that have other abilities, but if you're doing like shop videos, setting up, having tripods, having stabilizers, any of that stuff can be helpful. Those are great to be able to do kind of live shop tours type work. But at the same time, if you're just doing the talking head stuff, the interview stuff, yeah, a very good webcam and a decent mic is most of what you
Yeah,
need to do.
yeah. We talked offline, and
Yeah,
this is something that a lot of people think when they see something like this
yeah,
online that it takes a lot, and it really doesn't. And that's kind of the gist is that you can do these things. You just have to really investigate and research and
sure.
find out that if you have a phone, if you have a smartphone, it's really all you need, and you could get a lot done. Like right now, we're using a third party streaming software that looks like it's causing some problems on Facebook. I have a few
Yeah,
people
seems like it.
commenting that they can't hear, but they can see it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll just drop a link in. Unfortunately, we're also streaming on LinkedIn. I don't think there's any issues over there. I'm
Yeah,
gonna get a link there and drop them in. But we're streaming through a third party here, but you don't necessarily have to have that, Eric. You can do everything. You could do live streaming right through the phone. Now
sure.
that to me, I feel like is an asset for a lot of people. They when they think that, hey, this is something I probably cannot do, but in reality, if you just Google it, you research it, you could probably do it right with your phone.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, a lot of these streamers really do. And especially as we see the advent of things like TikTok, where it's very, yes, there are produced TikToks. There are people who are doing full production. It's really centered around the phone, and it's really about kind of the personality of the people and sharing things very authentically. Certainly, there's lots of setup and people do makeup and every other thing you can imagine, just like they're doing what we used to think of as like a TV spot. Of course, the people are doing that, but the tolerance and desire for an authentic connection to people is at its ultimate high. People will allow for so much, and really it's about having that message that expresses who you are, what you do, and what's important to you, that's going to help with people. It's going to help with people connecting to you. I mean, there's certainly some buzzwords around this, like the parasocial relationship. If people don't know what that is, people tend to believe that they know you and feel like they're your friend when you're online a lot, when you're consistent with them. But the thing is, sometimes that works in our benefit, because when we share who we are and we get out there, whether it's authentically over, low res phone stuff, or we're just doing it, a guerrilla style as we're working, doing video, just talking head stuff, whatever it is, as we continue to share who we are and talk candidly with people, they feel like they know you, and that becomes kind of social trust. That becomes social proof. They see what you're working on, they see who you are, and they get to feel like that they can trust you and know you, and that can be good in a business sense as well as uh, people using it for influence.
Right, right. So let me ask you about the platforms that you've
Sure.
had the most success with and the least on social
Yeah.
media?
Well, to be honest with you, it's all about demographics. Everybody says, "Oh, what platform should I start on?" And I always say, "Well, who are you serving? What's the demographic of the people you're working on, and where are they?" As much as it sounds funny, but you can say that, okay, TikTok is the new hot platform. I remember when we had this discussion, everybody said absolutely Facebook. And I also know that currently people will say, don't do Facebook. It's all old people. And being a middle-aged person, hey, I feel that. I feel that. I
Right,
understand.
right.
At the same time, uh, depending on where you are, with the company I'm working with in Brilliance right now, we do embroidery software. We have a couple of different like demographic bumps, I call them, places where we have different groupings. The older grouping, still very heavy on Facebook. If that's your
Hmm.
market, leaving Facebook because it's quote unquote not cool anymore is at your peril, because your people are there, your audience is
Right,
there.
right.
And also, we've had a great deal of luck with Facebook groups, because what we do often has a social interaction and an instructional capacity where people talking to each other about how to use our software is part of what we get out of it.
Hmm.
Groups might not work for an apparel decorator, and I would say they're more likely to have traction on Instagram or on TikTok. But then it really depends on who's there. If you don't have audience on TikTok, or you're not aiming to gain one, the kind of people who are using TikTok regularly, then it's probably not the space for you. At the same time, I'm seeing lots of decorators making hay over on TikTok because they're showing these small communities exactly what they're about. Especially, there are now decorators who are also designers, and they have their own lines. As much as we always joke around in the apparel decoration space that everybody's got the best idea for a t-shirt ever, and we're like, okay, let me get your deposit up front. But at the same time, there are people who are really, they're coming up with their concepts. They develop these little audiences who trust in those concepts, or who have some sort of vibe with the concept that the algorithm keeps delivering them back to that creator, and they're selling out, small run
Right.
apparel all the time.
Yeah, I think, the answer is never the same
No,
whoever I talk to, because
no.
and you nailed it when you said it's where your audience is.
Yeah,
And I've noticed that, and I'm a big proponent of Facebook. I have been,
sure.
even though for personal use I'm not a big fan, but for
Yeah,
businesses, you can find your people, you can find uh, potential prospects, you can find your tribe, so to speak,
yeah,
in some sort of Facebook group somewhere. Like, they exist, they're out there. There are
they
billions,
do.
they say, of people, and groups are huge. You could find a group for anything. And if you go
Yeah,
into those groups and you engage and you start to network, you're going to find that there are a lot of people in there that you could potentially be doing business with in any area of promotional products. Now, that said, there are other networks, and people
sure.
love TikTok. And I
Yeah,
think TikTok, obviously, it's the hot network. It's been hot for a couple of years now, and I don't think it's going away. I'm a proponent too of TikTok, only because you can create really good quality video with a lot of what, these newfangled technologies, overlays,
sure.
audio, and text, and there's so much you could do on TikTok. But the allure of TikTok for me is that you can repurpose that content and push it out on other networks and get more
Yeah.
bang for your buck on other networks with content that you create in TikTok. I think it's behooves a business, if you want to create some good content, you can have a TikTok account, but also repurpose it elsewhere.
Yeah, you can repurpose YouTube Shorts, you can do
Hmm.
Instagram Reels, and I think that's fine. I think there's no reason not to do that. I think that the only thing I see sometimes with people with TikTok, and you can play this for laughs or for itself and make it work out. Hey, I'm a 40-plus-year-old guy. I don't go in there and say, "Hey, man, no cap, it's lit, fam." I'm not gonna go in
Right,
there and
right, right,
try and be 20 right now, or
right, right,
18 or 13. I'm not gonna try and do that. I'm going to authentically talk about it. Don't get me wrong, I see people playing that for laughs and it works. So if that works
right,
for you, fine.
right,
If the joke is that you're out of touch and it's funny, awesome. But
right.
it may not be your whole personality. As long as you go in there authentically, whatever platform you're gonna be is gonna work out for you better that way. If you're consistent and you have a voice. Now, I'm going to say this too. Funny enough, other platforms have worked for me over the years. LinkedIn, and weirdly enough, LinkedIn groups, which now has kind of gone entirely by the wayside. For a long time, I had a great deal of kind of penetration there, where I would put something
Hmm.
out in a LinkedIn group, a specific, and specifically like an embroidery group, an apparel decoration group, apparel marketing groups,
Hmm.
fashion groups, even though it was just kind of tertiary. It was not exactly related to my stuff. And then they'd come in for education, ask questions about embroidery, and then kind of join in and understand. They're like, oh, hey, well, you're somebody who knows this. where do you get your work from? And if I was somebody who's currently at a shop, and when I was, I could direct them to my shop for that stuff.
Hmm.
So I was doing educational work to teach people about embroidery. But when people are further afield, invariably, even now when I teach digitizing at the big trade shows. The first question almost always, and if not the first, within the top 5, when someone comes up to the table after the class is, can you just do it for me?
Huh.
If I were contracting digitizing right now, I would have no end of clients.
Huh.
Being a subject matter expert, and that's the same from back in the day when we first started
Right.
this, being a subject matter expert and being seen as someone who can project that and who does know what they're talking about and has some social proof for that, but from the uptake and from people seeing your actual work, really can lead to some stuff. And like I said,
Right.
LinkedIn, surprisingly enough, and these days, weirdly enough, if you're on platforms like Amazon, let's say you're selling on Amazon, Amazon has a social component. They have a social media component they integrated. Is it the best? No. Would I spend my
Right.
time on Amazon social? No. Do I see people making sales on Amazon
Right.
social? Yes, I do.
Huh.
Absolutely. I see. And also having a storefront on Amazon, I've seen that social components that point to that storefront
Huh.
inside the Amazon ecosystem do drive traffic. But
Wow.
it's something
Wow.
you'd never think of. It's something that you would never expect. Also, people, as much as it's not traditionally social media, don't sleep on your email list.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's in the same vein, and people have forgotten that newsletters work, but newsletters still work,
Huh.
especially if you have a demographic of people who still use email.
Jeff Bezos in the social media game. Who knew? Who knew?
Bizarre. Yeah, it's bizarre. I admit, I think it's bizarre. But if
Yeah.
you've ever seen like QVC or any sort of shopping TV, they also have live video content on the Amazon
Yeah.
homepage that sellers can involve themselves in, or influencers.
Huh.
And if you're selling in those kind of markets, it's worthwhile to at least see what it is, especially when it first starts out. Because as we know, when you first start out a new market or a new platform, the people who are interested in that platform taking off will absolutely promote you to the nth degree if you're one of their early adopters.
Huh.
So when one of these things launches, I always stop and take a look at it, because even if I'm not going to continue it on in perpetuity as we try it out,
Mhm.
that first little push when they're trying to make it a thing, like the Amazon social, if you were one of the first people on Amazon social, you had all the audience, even if it was smaller. We're
Sure.
talking about a massive marketplace. A small segment of a massive marketplace audience is a worthwhile endeavor.
I agree. I agree. All right, Eric, before we get into the unscripted,
Sure.
thought-provoking questions, any final tips for anybody who's in the decorating business who wants to jump onto social media?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip here is to show what you do. So definitely show what you're doing, show the kind of product you have, but show what it does. What is it good for? What problems it solves? Show the kind of work you want to do in continuance. So the kind of work that you think is the most profitable and also the most enjoyable for you, if that's part of what you're looking for, your calculus. Make sure you're showing that work, because what you show is what people will ask for. And be your authentic self. Whether that's about it can still be crafted as a corporate message. Your corporate culture is authentic to your
Sure.
company, but be out there and sharing exactly who you are and what you stand for. Because having it's what I always say about marketing in general. If you say your market is everybody, it's nobody. If you say your specialty is everything, it's nothing. Even though you have a specialty, it doesn't mean you can't do other things for people. They will see your specialty, see your expertise, see your market, and say, wow, this is somebody who knows their business, and still ask you for something that's more of a generic
Hmm.
decoration project, because they trust that specialty. They see that your skill is there. They will then trust you with the staples. They'll trust you with the other stuff that you're not necessarily advertising toward. You don't have to turn down business just because you market to a direct audience.
100%. I
Yeah.
feel like just being visual on
Yeah.
social media, whether or not you're the CEO, you're the social media manager, whoever you are, if you're a small
Yeah.
mom and pop business, you're one, two people, three people, get on camera,
Sure.
get on the videos, show what you do, be authentic, try to educate. And I think that is going to be the, you know, the real ticket for standing out on social media. And don't sell. I
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
preach that all the time. Stop selling. It's
Stop selling.
you're going to get, if you stand out, remain top of mind,
Sure.
you're going to network, you're going to get sales are going to be a byproduct of that. So I think
Absolutely.
those are important. All right, Eric, now I'm going to ask you a handful of questions that
Awesome.
you have no knowledge of. And I just, this is something to, I introduced in 2023. And I want to, my guests to kind of think on their feet and kind of, give the most authentic answers to these questions. So, question number one: who has been your
Yes.
most important professional mentor?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. My most important professional mentor, it's hard because I've had so many good ones. Recently, I'm gonna say that he's really taken a lot of space in my mind lately. It's, Brian Bailey, who's the creator of Brilliance. He wrote the software I currently work for, that company. He's been incredible, and so I have to say he's taken a lot of primacy, especially in recent years, because he's taught me a lot, about what's going on behind the scenes. I would have to say overall, though, I know this is gonna sound cheesy, uh, but a lot of it was my mom. I know it sounds
Okay.
funny. Why am I gonna say that? Because a lot of it was about doing the best work and doing the work that needed to get done. And I think that if I look at overall between my mom and my dad was a very hard worker, always a mechanic. He always put in the hours and was never afraid to do something hard. My mom always would look for the place where something was lacking and do the work that needed to get done.
Huh.
And I think that's what I've always done too. I know it sounds funny to say, but your professional mentor, and I could talk about all the wonderful people I've worked with, and I would love to name everybody's names. There's tons of folks. So there's the guys, the two regular guys who've been awesome. You know, Aaron and Terry. I've been their producer at their show for a very long time, and that's been incredible. There's been all the people I've learned from. My first operator, Elena, who helped me learn embroidery machines, huge. But if I really look at the values that have carried me throughout this, I have to say it's my parents,
I love that
and I
answer.
know
I
it's my
love that
parents.
answer.
Yeah,
It's a great answer, Eric.
it's just true.
To me, I feel like if somebody asked me this question, I would have a very difficult time answering it
Yeah,
as well,
it's tough.
because there
It's
are a lot
tough.
of people that you can give that shout out to. But to
Oh
me, I
yeah,
feel like your folks, your mom, your
yeah,
dad, whoever it is who sort of instilled a lot of your values and your the qualities
it's true.
that you
Yeah.
bear, that they are probably responsible for who you are today. So yes, it's a very good political answer. You don't want to name
Well,
somebody.
here's the other thing I'm going to say. I want to one more little tiny shout out. I know I was supposed to give one answer. I gave 10, but I'm going to take this privilege.
Do
The
it.
one other thing I'm going to say is all of you folks who wrote from the early magazines. When I was first learning by myself, I spent months learning digitizing entirely on my own. I was in full production before I had ever seen a magazine or a how-to article, and I only have ever been in one class in my life, and I was already digitizing at the time. I was already commercially in full production. But when I first found my first magazines, so I think about like Bonnie and Jerry Lee and the people who wrote for the magazines. You guys know, in the embroidery
Right.
world, you and original magazine authors just saved my life because I felt like I wasn't alone for the first
Huh.
time ever. And to talk about the original parasocial relationship, I had stars in my eyes when I met these folks. Now we're all friends and we know each other.
Huh.
And now I have taught on the same, on the same podiums that they teach on, and I've been around where they were, and I can't say enough for them. So if I want, the other half of this is you folks who are the original educators in our industry who stepped up and said, I'm going to share at a time when back in the day digitizing was seen as a secret, and I got
Huh.
chewed out from some old school digitizers who said, you're sharing everything that we learned, this is why are you
Right.
sharing all of our secrets. And
Interesting. Okay.
those folks who published, I can't thank you enough.
That's
That's the truth.
awesome.
That's
Well,
the
it's good that you wrapped up there because the Academy Award bell was dinging.
truth. Right.
They're telling you to get off stage.
I know.
I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure, let's do it.
So, are you a dog person or a cat person or something else?
I would say I had dogs when I was growing up, but I am a cat person now. My wife is a big cat person, and
Okay.
we actually, this is the thing people don't know, we have 6 cats.
Oh
We have 6
wow.
cats. We originally had a couple cats, and we were fostering and taking care of a pregnant mama cat, and right at the time when everyone had cats and no one would take them, and we just said we couldn't let them go on the street. So now I
Sure.
have 6 little cats, and
Oh wow.
they are
That's
awesome. I love
that's a
them.
lot of work. I grew up a cat person.
Yep.
Cats all my life.
Yeah.
Married my wife who's allergic to cats. So now I'm a dog person. Again, this is another question I would have very difficult time answering because I can go either way on that. I love my dog, but I love cats too.
Yep.
So yeah, you and I are both on the same page with that one. All right. So last question for you, Eric.
Sure.
What is your all-time favorite movie? Which is probably a very difficult question to answer as well.
Wow. All-time favorite movie, that is super tough. I hadn't
You
even
can give me
thought
one of
about
them.
that. Here's what I'll say. I think that, the Lord of the Rings movies,
Hmm.
as a whole, because boy, I have watched all of those. That's probably an all-time favorite. I will watch them repeatedly. But the funny thing is, when I was a kid, I'm just gonna admit this, it was RoboCop.
Oh wow, I love
which is
RoboCop. Yeah.
so goofy. I know, goofy, violent. I watched it way too early, but for some reason, there was just something. And funny enough, that was the whole concept of controlling embroidery machines. There was just a robot person. I was like, sign me up. When I got
Yeah.
a little older, it was like Ghost in the Shell, anime, stuff like that.
Right.
I was
Right.
like, man, I'm super into sci-fi. So the funny thing is, the two sides of my life are like that. It's like history and then the fantasy coming from it. Because guys, if you don't know, my degree is in medieval studies. So
Oh wow.
Tolkien, the
Okay.
guy who
Yeah.
wrote Lord of the Rings
Sure.
and The Hobbit, was a medievalist. He was actually an Anglo-Saxon medievalist, which I was kind of on that track.
Huh.
So love that side of the world. So the fantasy side of the world is there, but the other side for me has always been sci-fi,
I love it.
Asimov. And then for some reason, when I was a kid, I don't know, RoboCop spoke to me. As violent and awful as that movie was, I just watched that. I burned out that VHS, and
Great
I'm dating
movie.
myself, but it's absolutely true.
Great
So
movie. I mean,
there's the
I
two.
actually saw that in the theaters, if you could believe. I was 15 when that came out. I believe it was
Mm,
1987. I saw that in the theaters. Loved it. Like you said, it's violent. It's inappropriate. But to me, I
totally.
feel like it's. I saw it not too long ago, a couple years ago, and it still held. It holds up really well. I love the
Totally.
one-liners. I buy that for $1. Like there are so many classic
What
lines of that
levels?
movie.
It's on levels too, because it's like it's a
Yeah.
social commentary too. If you really stop
Right.
and lean back and do your best like literary, your literary examination of RoboCop, there's a total social commentary there. There's
Totally.
a question about what makes you human,
Right.
about authority in the world. There's a lot of stuff going on in RoboCop, but admittedly, it's also a popcorn flick. So,
Totally. Totally.
and hey, cool robot stuff. That's all. I just wanted desperately to be a robot. I don't know. I still right now, just
I wanted to be
dump me
Peter
into Roblox.
Weller. Peter Weller
Yes.
and RoboCop.
Which, by the way,
Oh,
who has a history PhD, Peter Weller, a
yeah.
very educated dude. If you ever
Yep.
see him on social media now, he talks about it. It's kind of
Huh.
funny.
Yeah. Well, Eric, this has been a great conversation. Despite
Awesome, man.
our tech issues on social media,
Yeah,
I had a professor
it
in
happens.
college who would tell me this is in the 90s, and
Yeah.
he would say technology will fail you. Count on it. And it looks like we may have had some technological issues. I'm hoping that this episode held up for the archive so that I can stream it out.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're going to be doing this again at some point. But again, Eric, this has been a great conversation. How could people reach you if they want to do so?
Hey, the best and easiest way to do it, my name is a weird spelling. It's Erich. If you go to ericcampbell.com or search for me, it's very easy to find me after this many years of consistently being on social media. But the best way to really kind of get in touch with me is to see me on Fridays. So 2:30 Mountain Time PM. I am on the Take Up on YouTube, on honestly LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch. I stream all of them concurrently. So wherever you are, you can get to it. If you want to go to YouTube, go to ericcampbell.com. There's a tab at the top that says the Take Up, and you can get the full playlist of 130 plus episodes of me talking about embroidery, decorated apparel business, and everything around that.
Yes, that's E Rich. That's how I remember it. I go
Yes,
E
yes.
Rich because I know that, when, and look, you very distinctive spelling for your name, but I
Sure.
remember you messaging one. I think it was you were messaging me, or I saw it on social media, where
Yeah,
if people get your name wrong once, it's okay, but when they consistently get it wrong, when they know how it's spelled, it's a little bit off-putting. But it's easy to find your
for
social accounts
sure.
because it's Eric Campbell, Erich.
CH. Yeah.
Yep.
If you get the funny German spelling, if you know Erich, well then
Yeah.
that's when you got me. And honestly, I feel bad for the other couple of them there was an actor. There's a show called like One Tree Hill, and this poor
Huh.
actor probably very much wanted ericcampbell.com back then, and had to
Oh
wonder every
wow.
day who was this goofy embroidery guy who was so early on the web that I can't get any accounts. Well, sorry, dude. Sorry, Eric.
It's been taken.
It's been taken, my man.
All right,
Get out
Eric.
there early.
Thank you for your time today. For Eric, I'm Vinny. We'll see you next time on the social angle.